What's going on, guys? The kid is back. Been taking a little break lately as work's just been hectic, and I've honestly, just for my own mental health, I've really need a break from all this and just to ground myself, get back into the real world for a bit. And yeah, like I said, business has just been crazy lately, so I've only really been focused on that. But nonetheless, I'm back again today, and we're going to be talking about the freedom movement and sort of where I feel that this movement is leading towards. This video is sponsored by Thought Cloud CBD oil. So for a while now, I've just been taking a bit of a step back from all these influences and sort of taking a break as well, but still here and there monitoring what's going on and seeing the steps that have been taken over the last month or 2 months within this movement. First off, I just wanted to talk about protesting and my opinions on protesting. Now, I have nothing against protests, and I went to many protests last year. Now, I have nothing against protesting, and I think it can be a great thing to show solidarity, unity. But right now, I don't believe that we're going to see any sort of positive change with the people who are leading these protests, and more so just about what their ulterior motives may actually be with this group and who they actually are. Now, I'm not going to be calling anyone out. I'm not going to specifically name anyone's names or call anyone out specifically, but I just wanted to bring this to people's attention just so that they may start asking the right questions and start questioning where they may be being led themselves. And I mentioned this in a previous video about my thoughts on Invasion Day and how that is a controlled movement, and other movements like Black Lives Matter, LGBT, the feminist movement, Antifa, all those, they're all left-orientated movements. And I think it's a bit hypocritical for a more so right-leaning movement, even though it claims to be sovereign, to not be questioning whether their own movement is a controlled government operation and where that may lead. So I just think lately that the movement has been real scattered. There's been so much drama going on, so much politics being played, and I feel like it's a lot of black pilling information at the end of the day. And how is that really any different to what the mainstream media are doing if we're just constantly filling our heads with negative information about this fear porn that the government are creating, is sharing their news articles about, oh, you're going to have to take a vaccine every time you fly, or things like that. I mean, it's not going to happen. They're not actually going to make this mandatory, so we don't need to worry about that. And what we should really be focusing on, instead of this whole vaccine thing and the masks and all that, is our human rights being stripped away, because these other things are just distractions. But I'm getting a bit off topic. That isn't what the point of this video was about. So I wanted to sort of focus on the freedom movement specifically and how it started and where it's going now. So originally, this movement began as a sovereignty movement, and within months that has now shifted into a more political movement, whilst people are still claiming that they have no faith in politics. And now you've got independent journalists who should be impartial giving speeches at protests, almost rallying the troops in some wartime-like speech. Now, I think there is a bit more to that story, but that's a topic for another day. I just find it incredible that someone who should be impartial has built up a very decent sized following. They have a lot of supporters, obviously, and now they're using that platform to politically, win votes? What's the goal here? And I thought this was no trust in politics, no faith in the government movement. It was about government oppression and sovereignty, and now it's politics. Wonder how we got here. I personally have been to many of these protests, and I wanted to speak a little bit about what I've seen and felt at these events, specifically some of the last ones I went to. I have two things that I feel this movement is being used for. One, it's to paint them as clowns. I see these protesters being used as pawns to discredit actual research that's being done, and to paint them out as conspiracy theorists, tinfoil hat wearers. And it's pretty clear when you watch the news reports on these events that the influencers are clearly working alongside the mainstream to paint that picture, because it takes two to tango, you know. And number two, I feel like the movement is being used to paint patriotic people as some sort of far right extremist group, and in turn will get labelled, this movement, as a domestic terrorist group. And yeah, it's pretty clear when you watch the news reports on like things like ASIO and 50% of their budget being targeted towards far right domestic terrorism, as they feel that that is a very big threat in this country right now. So I saw this very clearly at a protest marching against media corruption, which is something that I agree with. During this protest, all I saw was the image of crazy tinfoil hat wearers yelling and abusing passers-by on the street to make them sound crazy, to discredit actual research. Because obviously there's misinformation in these movements as well, like it's infiltrated by that. But there is genuine research in there that could make a positive change in the world that is just being completely painted over by these movements that are doing more damage than good. So where do I see this all leading? Well, I like to refer to what happened just a few months back, actually, when the Capitol building was raided in the US by the Republicans and the Patriots, Trump supporters, MAGA movement. And I see a very similar thing happening here in Australia today. If you look at the MAGA movement, with Trump being their leader, who, you probably won't like me saying this if you're a Trump supporter, but he did divide the country. He may not look like it, but he did categorise all the patriots in one section, and then all the leftists were categorised by people, celebrities and hot big names and things like that. It's a different story, but he did divide the country into Q-tards and libtards, in a way. He did do that. That was what he was in for, and that's what he did. And then what happened was that movement was then led through influencers, psyops and the QAnon psyop, into people believing that they were being sent by, like, Q sent them. They believed that they were receiving messages from some higher up source that was telling them to do these things, and they ended up raiding the Capitol building, got manipulated into doing that, and labelled as domestic terrorists. And then a lot of those people who just happened to be there on the day, their lives are ruined now. So if you compare that to what's happening in Australia, obviously we don't have Trump, but in his place we have numerous lists from every state of different influencers that I feel are doing a very similar thing, and possibly not so much creating domestic terrorists, but creating a group that can be labelled as domestic terrorists. And if you're a domestic terrorist on paper, then you are a domestic terrorist in the eyes of the law and everyone around you. That's just a little something to think about when you are attending these protests. So do be very wary of who's around you and maybe the messages they're putting out there, especially when they become very revolutionary based. So don't let this video dishearten you or feel that I'm trying to purposely create division inside the movement, or I'm a disinformation agent or something like that. I'm purely doing this out of the love for my people, and I just don't want to see anyone get hurt like what's happened in America. And I couldn't really live with myself if I could smell this rot on the horizon that's brewing and knowingly not have done anything about it. If there's one thing you can take away from this video, we don't want division between the majority and ourselves. We want to bring the majority across. We don't want them thinking that we're crazy. Like, if we can give them proper, well-spoken, well-written evidence and information about what's really going on, and not just saying COVID's a hoax, you're a sheep, other buzzwords, then we can actually make a positive change in this world. So I hope I haven't pissed too many people off with this one, but it needed to be made and I've been putting it off for too long. So there's going to be some follow-up information in other videos coming. This was just a bit of a teaser, but until then, I'll see you in the next one.